Blue and red lights spilled across the wet asphalt, flashing over the cracked steps of the apartment building like a warning nobody had asked for. Ronan Cade stood barefoot in the rain, his leather jacket thrown over bare shoulders, staring at the boy pounding on his door like the world was ending behind him. "Please," Eli Marsh gasped, his glasses fogged, his voice breaking on the single word. "Please, I didn't know where else to go." Ronan had ignored this boy for 6 months. 6 months of polite nods in the hallway, 6 months of pretending. He didn't notice the soft laugh that carried through the thin apartment wall. 6 months of telling himself it didn't matter. But nothing about the way his chest tightened right now felt like it didn't matter. He grabbed Eli's trembling hand and pulled him inside just as the first police car rounded the corner of the block. And in that single motion, rough palm against soft fingers, something between them shifted forever. The building on Larkspur Street was the kind of place people ended up in, not the kind of place people chose. Cracked mailboxes, a stairwell that smelled like old rain, and neighbors who mostly kept their doors closed and their business closer. Ronan Cade had lived on the second floor for 2 years, ever since he'd left his father's garage in Ohio and ridden his motorcycle east with nothing but a duffel bag and a grudge he never talked about. He was 26, broad-shouldered, tattooed from wrist to shoulder, and about as approachable as a locked gate. The kind of man people crossed the hallway to avoid, not because he'd ever done anything to earn it, but because silence read as danger to people who didn't know better. Ronan liked it that way. Fewer questions. Fewer people trying to get close enough to leave. Eli Marsh moved in across the hall on a Tuesday in March, hauling 3 boxes labeled books, fragile emotionally in blue marker, wearing a cardigan 2 sizes too big and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He was 22, a graduate student studying astrophysics, and he smiled at everyone he passed like the world hadn't yet given him a reason not to. "Hi," Eli had said that first day, extending a hand that Ronan didn't take. "I'm Eli. I just moved in. I bake when I'm nervous, so if you ever smell something burning, it's probably me and it's probably fine." Ronan had grunted something non-committal and shut his door. He didn't do neighbors. He didn't do friendly. He definitely didn't do whatever it was that made his stomach flip a little at the sound of that voice, bright and easy, carrying through the wall like it belonged there. For weeks, Ronan kept his distance the way he kept distance from everything. Efficiently, deliberately, without apology. He left early for the garage where he worked, came home late smelling of motor oil and exhaust, and nodded at Eli in the hallway with the same blank expression he gave the mailman. He told himself it meant nothing. He told himself a lot of things. But he noticed. He noticed the way Eli hummed off-key while carrying groceries. He noticed the crooked stack of star charts taped to the inside of Eli's window, visible from the parking lot at night when Ronan came home and paused, just for a second, to look up. He noticed the burnt sugar smell that drifted under his door some evenings, and the small, unlabeled containers of cookies that occasionally appeared on his welcome mat with sticky notes that said things like "sorry if these are bad, still learning and no pressure to say thank you, I just made too many." He never ate them in front of anyone. He never mentioned them either. But he never threw them away. The night everything started to shift was the night Eli's car wouldn't start. It was late October, cold enough that breath fogged in the parking lot, and Ronan was wiping grease from his hands after fixing his bike when he heard the frustrated grind of an engine that refused to turn over, followed by a soft, defeated curse that didn't sound like it came naturally to the person saying it. Piece of Eli smacked the steering wheel gently, more out of helplessness than anger, and dropped his forehead against it with a groan. Of course tonight. Ronan told himself to go inside. He told himself this wasn't his problem, that the kid could call a tow truck, that getting involved meant getting close, and getting close meant eventually getting hurt the way it always did. But his feet were already moving across the lot before his brain caught up. "Pop the hood," he said, and Eli's head shot up so fast his glasses nearly flew off. You don't have to. Pop the hood." Eli did, hands shaking slightly, not from cold. Ronan leaned over the engine with the ease of a man who'd spent his whole life with grease under his fingernails. And within a few minutes he'd found the loose battery cable, tightened it, and stepped back as the engine roared to life like it had never doubted itself. "Oh my God," Eli breathed, staring at the dashboard lights like they were a miracle. "Oh my God, Thank you. I have a presentation tomorrow. I would have actually died. This is the nicest thing anyone's. He stopped himself, cheeks going pink even in the dim parking lot light. Sorry. I ramble when I'm relieved. Ronan wiped his hands on a rag, fighting something that felt embarrassingly close to a smile. It's fine. Can I make you dinner? As a thank you? I know that's probably weird, we barely talk, but I really don't know how to say thank you in a way that isn't food. It's kind of my whole personality. You don't owe me anything. I know I don't. Eli's eyes met his, steady despite the nervous energy radiating off him. I want to anyway. And that was the first time Ronan Cade felt something crack open in his chest that he'd spent years welding shut. Dinner turned into a Thursday habit neither of them planned or named. Eli would knock twice, softly, and Ronan would open the door already knowing who it was. Some small traitorous part of him listening for those particular footsteps in the hallway all week without admitting it to himself. Eli's apartment was nothing like Ronan expected. Warm in a way that had nothing to do with the radiator, string lights looping across the ceiling, a telescope angled toward the window, books stacked in towers that looked precarious but never fell. It felt like walking into someone's heart with the furniture rearranged around it. You're staring, Eli said one night, setting down 2 plates of pasta that smelled like garlic and something Ronan couldn't name but wanted more of. You've got stars taped to your window. They're constellations. I chart them. It's a whole thing. I told you I was a nerd. You can't act surprised now. Eli sat across from him, tucking one leg beneath himself, glasses catching the light. What about you? What does the big scary biker do when nobody's watching? Ronan almost deflected the way he always did. But something about the warmth of the room, the candor in Eli's voice, made the words come out honest instead. I fix things. Bikes mostly. Sometimes cars. My dad had a garage back in Ohio. I learned early that engines make sense even when people don't. Do people not make sense to you? Not usually. Ronan looked at him then, really looked, at the crooked glasses and the ink-stained fingers and the way Eli listened like every word mattered. You're an exception. Eli's breath caught, soft and quick, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of something neither of them had a name for yet, something building slow and quiet like weather gathering behind a mountain. Over the following weeks, Thursday dinners became Tuesday coffees, became late-night conversations on the fire escape, blankets wrapped around their shoulders, Eli pointing out constellations while Ronan pretended to look at the sky when he was really watching the way Eli's whole face lit up when he talked about something he loved. That one Cygnus, Eli said one night in November, breath fogging in the cold. The swan. Legend says it represents a friend who died trying to save someone, and the gods put him in the sky so he'd never be forgotten. That's a sad story for something so pretty. Most pretty things have sad stories underneath them. Eli glanced at him sideways. You, for example. Ronan's jaw tightened. What makes you say that? You get this look sometimes. Like you're bracing for something. Like you learned a long time ago that good things don't last, so you'd rather not want them at all. Eli's voice was gentle, careful. The way you'd approach something wounded. I'm not trying to push. I notice things. It's kind of my whole personality too. Ronan didn't answer right away. The rooftop wind picked up, and their shoulders were pressed together for warmth, close enough that he could feel Eli's heartbeat through his jacket sleeve, quick and warm and alive. My dad wasn't a good man, Ronan said finally, the words scraping out of somewhere he didn't visit often. He didn't like that I was different. Didn't like it before I even had the words for it myself. I left when I was 19 and I haven't gone back. Learned pretty fast that the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally sometimes don't, and after that it's hard to trust that anyone will. Eli didn't say anything for a moment. Then, slowly, carefully, he reached over and laced his fingers through Ronan's, cold hand finding warm one, holding on without pulling him anywhere he wasn't ready to go. I'm not going anywhere, Eli whispered, for what it's worth. Ronan looked down at their joined hands, at the ink on his knuckles against the pale softness of Eli's fingers, and felt something in his chest that he hadn't let himself feel in years. Hope, fragile and terrifying, blooming despite every wall he'd built against it. They didn't kiss that night. But their faces drifted closer, breath mingling in the cold air, close enough that Ronan could count the small constellation of freckles across Eli's nose, close enough that either of them could have closed the distance with barely any movement at all. They stayed there, foreheads almost touching, hearts pounding, until the moment stretched so full it nearly broke. And then Eli laughed softly, nervous and warm, and pulled back just enough to breathe. "Sorry," he murmured. "I don't want to rush you into anything." "You're not rushing me into anything I don't want," Ronan said, voice low and rough. "I'm just scared of wanting it." "Me too," Eli admitted. "Let's be scared together, then." Winter deepened, and so did whatever was growing between them. Unnamed, unclaimed, but undeniable to anyone who watched them together for more than a few minutes. Ronan started leaving the garage early on Thursdays. Eli started saving his favorite part of every day for the moment Ronan's motorcycle pulled into the lot. But good things Ronan had learned a long time ago rarely stayed simple. His name was Marcus, a classmate of Eli's from the astrophysics department, sharp-suited, confident, the kind of charm that came from never once doubting he belonged in a room. He'd started showing up more, helping Eli with a research paper that seemed to require an awful lot of coffee dates and lingering touches on the arm. Ronan told himself it wasn't jealousy. He told himself a lot of things, as it turned out, that weren't true. "He's just a friend," Eli said one evening, catching the tightness in Ronan's jaw when Marcus's name came up for the third time that week. "You know that, right? Marcus and I are just colleagues. You don't owe me an explanation." The words came out harder than Ronan meant them to, edged with something he didn't want to examine too closely. We haven't said what this is." Something flickered across Eli's face. Hurt, quick and quiet, gone almost as soon as it appeared. "Right, of course. My mistake." The silence that followed was the first real distance between them in weeks, and it sat heavy in the apartment like weather about to break. Eli busied himself with dishes that didn't need washing. Ronan stared at his hands, furious at himself, unsure how to bridge a gap he'd carved open with his own fear. "I'm sorry," Ronan said finally, low. "That came out wrong. It's fine. It's not. He dragged a hand down his face, searching for words that had never come easily to him. "I don't know how to do this. Any of this. I've spent so long making sure nobody gets close enough to matter. And you already matter more than I know what to do with, and it scares the hell out of me, and I take it out on the wrong things." Eli set down the dish towel, turning to face him fully, eyes soft despite the hurt still lingering there. "I'm not going to pretend I'm not falling for you, Ronan. I have been for a while. But I need you to be honest with me, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." "I'm falling for you too," Ronan said, the confession scraping its way out like something long buried finally seeing daylight. "I have been since the day you left cookies on my doormat with a note that said no pressure to say thank you." A small, surprised laugh escaped Eli, wet at the edges. "You remember that?" "I remember everything about you." For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the space between them charged with everything they hadn't said yet. Then Eli crossed the kitchen, slow and certain, and stopped close enough that Ronan could feel the warmth radiating off him, could see the flutter of his pulse at his throat, could hear the unsteady breath they were both holding. "Can I kiss you?" Eli whispered. "Please," Ronan said, and it came out like a prayer. Their first kiss was soft, hesitant, two people who'd spent months circling something they were both afraid to name finally letting themselves land. Eli's hand came up to rest against Ronan's jaw, fingers trembling slightly, and Ronan's arms wrapped around him like he was something precious he'd been waiting his whole life to be allowed to hold. When they finally broke apart, foreheads resting together, both of them breathless, Eli let out a shaky laugh. "I've wanted to do that since October. I've wanted to do that since March," Ronan admitted, and kissed him again. The weeks that followed were the happiest Ronan could remember being in years. They stopped hiding what they were from each other, even if they weren't ready to announce it to the world. Thursday dinners turned into every night. The fire escape became their place, blankets and star charts and slow, warm kisses under a sky Eli knew by heart. But peace, Ronan had learned the hard way, rarely lasted without a storm coming to test it. It happened on a Tuesday in late January, rain hammering the windows, wind rattling the old building's bones. Ronan was working late at the garage when his phone buzzed with a text from Eli that made his blood run cold. "Someone's outside my apartment. I don't recognize the car. I'm scared." Ronan didn't remember the ride home. He remembered his hands white-knuckled on the handlebars, rain soaking through his jacket, his heart slamming against his ribs with a fear more consuming than anything he'd felt in years. He remembered pulling into the lot and seeing an unfamiliar car parked crooked near the entrance, engine running, headlights cutting through the storm. It was Eli's older brother, Daniel, a man Eli hadn't spoken to in over a year. Not since Daniel had said things about Eli's identity that no brother should ever say to someone he claimed to love. He'd shown up unannounced, drunk, angry, banging on Eli's door demanding he fix things before their mother's health worsened any further, that he stop embarrassing the family, words slurred with liquor and old resentment. Eli had locked himself out on the fire escape in his panic, phone in hand, when he realized the door lock had jammed behind him in the chaos. That was when he'd run down, barefoot in the rain, and pounded on Ronan's door, the same door where this story began, blue and red lights already painting the wet street outside as a neighbor, alarmed by the shouting, had called the police. "Please," Eli had gasped. "Please, I didn't know where else to go." Ronan pulled him inside, shielding him with his own body as the police cruiser rounded the corner. What followed was a blur of raised voices, an officer speaking calmly to a still shouting Daniel, Eli trembling against Ronan's chest, soaked and shaking, more from fear than cold. "You're safe?" Ronan murmured into his hair, arms wrapped tight around him, refusing to let go even as the chaos settled outside. "I've got you. You're safe." "He said such awful things," Eli whispered, voice breaking. "He said I ruined everything. He said, he's wrong." Ronan pulled back just enough to cup Eli's face in both hands, forcing their eyes to meet, wanting every word to land with the weight it deserved. "You didn't ruin anything. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, Eli Marsh. You hear me? The best thing." Eli's breath hitched, tears mixing with rain still clinging to his lashes. "I was so scared." I know, baby. I'm here now." The police eventually escorted Daniel away with a warning, and the building settled back into uneasy quiet, rain still tapping steadily against the windows. Ronan wrapped Eli in dry blankets, made him tea he barely touched, and held him on the couch until the shaking finally stopped and his breathing evened into something like calm. "I've spent so long being afraid that if people really saw me, they'd leave," Eli whispered into the quiet, head resting against Ronan's chest. "That's why Daniel's words hurt so much. Some part of me still believed them. Look at me." Ronan waited until Eli lifted his head, eyes red-rimmed and raw. "I have seen every part of you. The nerdy rambling, the burnt cookies, the stars on your window, the way you care about people even when they don't deserve it. I have seen all of it, and I have never once wanted to leave. I'm not going anywhere. Not tonight. Not ever if you'll let me stay. I don't just want you to stay tonight," Eli said softly, voice steadying with something that sounded almost like certainty despite everything that had just happened. "I want you to stay. For real. For all of it." "Then I'm yours," Ronan said, and sealed the promise with a kiss so tender it undid every wall he'd ever built. For all of it. Spring came slowly the way it always did, but it came. Daniel never returned, though Eli eventually reached out to their mother on his own terms, healing what could be healed and letting go of what couldn't. The fear that had gripped him that January night faded into something softer. Not forgotten, but no longer in control. Ronan changed too, in ways so gradual he almost didn't notice them himself. He stopped flinching at the idea of being seen. He let Eli's laughter fill rooms he used to keep silent. He started leaving his own door unlocked on Thursdays, an open invitation that needed no explanation anymore. One evening in April, on the same fire escape where they'd first held hands beneath the stars, Ronan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, carefully wrapped gift. Nothing extravagant, just a leather bracelet engraved with a tiny constellation, Cygnus, the swan who was never forgotten. "I know it's not a ring or anything big," Ronan said, uncharacteristically nervous, turning it over in his rough hands. I just wanted you to have something that reminded you every day that you're not going anywhere. Not from me. Not ever. Eli's eyes filled with tears as he took it, slipping it onto his wrist with hands that trembled from something entirely different than fear this time.